1 month into the new school year, and lots of changes have been announced in recent weeks concerning school admissions and school safety. The Project Pivot initiative was announced last week on the steps of City Hall, which will bring community-based organizations into high-risk schools to act as violence interrupters and to provide mentorship and counseling.
When the pandemic hit me and my peers and many of our communities in New York City, we fell apart. And even though we are back in school full-time, many of us, both students and adults, are still feeling the impact of the pandemic. This is why Project Pivot is such a timely and needed program in not only our lives, but our schools.
Joining us this morning to elaborate on Project Pivot and some of the other changes impacting New York City public schools is Chancellor David Banks. So, Chancellor, welcome back to the PIX11 Morning News. Good to see you. How you doing?
Good morning. Good to see you both.
You know, and before we talk about that important project, I do want to talk about the influx of migrants that we've been seeing play out in real time, right? Not only in the city, but how it's affecting the school system, right? Some schools reporting that there are just too many students to keep up with. The department supporting this new group of students, but how is it going right now, specifically in some of these schools that are very crowded?
It's interesting. I'm going to be visiting one of the schools which has received a pretty significant level of migrants, but I feel great about where we are. We've got a wonderful team that's been on the front line dealing with this issue. We've been providing all kinds of supports to parents and families, and I think we're in good shape. It is a challenge, to say the least, to have this many new families, many of them who do not speak English. We already had a shortage of bilingual educators. It is a challenge, but it's a challenge that we feel that we will meet, and we are meeting.
Do you know how many students have been joining the New York City public school system then, the new migrant students?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Do you know how many students there are, migrant students that have enrolled into the city public school system?
Yeah, it's increasing every day, but it's over 5,000 students that have entered our schools in a very short amount of time. So you can imagine the challenge that does in fact present. But I will tell you, on balance, what we have done and our team has really been really amazing. We have worked together with their families, we provided translators, and in addition to the work, they're also getting, backpacks and all kinds of supports for their families as well. We're going to continue to do that.
Yeah, you're certainly going above and beyond, trying to do everything you possibly can. At the start of the school year, we were talking about potential teacher shortages, right? So with an influx of 5,000 plus students, how are you doing with the number of teachers across the board in schools across the 5 boroughs?
We're doing well. When you hear about the national teacher shortage, that's not really a New York City issue. Our numbers in terms of teachers is about where it was even pre-pandemic. We've always had certain shortage areas, English as a second language and some of the STEM areas, but it's no worse than it ever was. The national teacher shortage is really a bigger issue around the country. We do pretty well here in New York City.
Let's switch gears a little bit. A couple of weeks ago, the Department of Education revamped its admissions policy, and it's once again focusing on a merit-based system. So does that raise concerns at all about creating a less diverse school system?
No, I don't think so, because I think on its face, this idea that, students of color, Black, Latino students can't make the mark is a premise that I fundamentally do not accept. I talk often about the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was about excellence, and it was about access. But it never said lower the standard, because, we've been going through a tough time. I don't believe that. I believe that Black and Latino students and students of all races have the same kinds of abilities, talents. They're brilliant. We just need to make sure we're providing them the kind of supports that they need. That's what Project Pivot is all about as well. Project Pivot is not simply a safety initiative. It's about additional resources and supports for the schools and the students that have been facing the greatest level of challenge. It's leadership development, it's academic tutoring and support. It is safety, it's a whole host of things. So we're committed to that as well.
Right, because you got to look at the totality of the entire student, right? And I think that's what you're trying to do, especially with Project Pivot. When it comes to high school admissions, there's still, though, going to be this lottery system in place, right? Some people have said they don't want it, but students will then fall into 4 categories based on their grades. So I guess the question really for you, Chancellor, is how do you ensure that students in underserved areas don't get overlooked here?
When we first came in, one of the things we were pressed with was gifted and talented programs. And even in the communities of color, they said, don't get rid of them, just expand them. And so that's what we did. And in the case here as well, we just felt as though making sure that we keep the standards high and we provide the additional supports, nobody's going to be left behind. But we certainly believe also in the adage that nothing is given, everything is earned. And young people will rise to the level of your expectation and the support. And that's what we're doing across the board, providing a whole host of resources so that all kids can thrive. And kids of color who've been shortchanged for far too many years in this system will thrive as well.
Yeah, let's take a deeper look into your Project Pivot program. How soon will these community-based organizations be in the schools where they're most needed?
They start in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
And we've identified 140 different community-based organizations and 138 schools across the city in every borough. And so it's just the start. As we continue to expand on it, we will see how things go. But we're looking forward to it. They'll work very closely. Some of their work will happen during the school day, some after school, some on the weekends. It'll be a very comprehensive approach.
You know, there was a lot of talk in the beginning of the school year about the budget, right, and how some funding was pulled away from the education funding. And then you look at the enrollment, which heading into the year was down. I don't know how the migrant situation affects the enrollment numbers, but where are you at when you look at enrollment? It used to be 1 million plus students. Are you still 1 million plus, and how does that affect the budget?
Yeah, we're less than 1 million. For many, many years, New York City was over 1 million. We're a little less, we're about 920,000 now. We lost 120,000 students over the last 5 years, including 70,000 during the last 2 years. But as I've gone around the city and you ask folks, what will it take to get you back into the schools? These are the programs that they want. They want programs like Gifted and Talented. They want merit-based approaches, and they want programs like Project Pivot, which provide additional levels of support. We're trying to be responsive to what the community is saying, and over time, it's a little early right now to see what the numbers look like. We're only, less than 2 months into the school year, but over time, we believe these are the right things to do.
I'm curious to know what your response is to some of your critics. State Comptroller Thomas DiNapoli's report, which says the DOE right now isn't doing enough to prepare public school students for college. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't really look at it as a criticism of myself per se. And the Comptroller's report was really a statewide report. He was talking about the state education department. But nonetheless, we all recognize across this entire state and right here in New York City that we've got a lot of work to do, and those are the things that we're doing.
Yeah.
We talk about bright starts and bold futures. If young people don't learn to read well by the 3rd grade and to be on grade level, everything else that you're doing, you're fighting an uphill battle. So that has been our #1 priority. We changed the approach to the teaching of reading. We're screening kids for dyslexia. We're putting in career pathways programs for young people once they graduate. So whether they go to college or career, we want them to have the skills and the credentials to be necessary. This administration is focused on all the things that we think will help all of our kids to be successful.
We are out of time here, but I did say last time we spoke to you that I was going to press you on it the next time, and that's snow days. So you said they're not happening. You said they're not happening, but do you really think people are going to show up to school and the online class if there's a blizzard outside? They're going to go out and play. So have you rethought it?
No, we've thought about it. And listen, we can't have it both ways. We can't have everybody tell us, you've got to work harder. The kids need more time. They're not accomplishing. But, God forbid you take away a snow day. Listen, we know what it is. I know what it was for me when I was a kid growing up. But this is all about just trying to make sure that our kids get what they need. That's all. But they'll be fine.
So you may adjust, right? You may, looking out the window, you may say, hey, I'm feeling giving today.
Yeah, they'll get a few hours of school, and then, by 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, they can go out and play. It'll be good.
Chancellor Banks, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us this morning. We appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Have a great day.
You too.
All right.